What's up everyone, it is Artex here from Vogons. Today I wanted just to have a quick tutorial video, I guess. This has been a question that's come up a couple times and one that I've actually asked myself on Vogons over the years about how to connect PS2 headers, I should say PS2 brackets, to PS2 headers, PS2 headers on motherboards. Specifically the ones that have come to my attention are normally the Asus boards that have an 8-pin header block, I guess, with 6 actual pins, which you can connect up a bracket similar to this one and have PS2 functionality on the socket 3 board, which is pretty nice. The tricky part is there is no standard configuration for how these connectors come, and if you don't know, the PS2 connectors usually only have 4 wires, as you can see here. This one's got, just happens to be brown, yellow, green, and red. I've had black, yellow, green, and blue. I've had all different kinds of connectors, different wire configurations. In addition, the existing header, as I mentioned, is usually in a 2x4 pin configuration or an 8. This is a 2x5 pin or a 10 slot pin connection. And so we need to figure out which pins go where, and it's important because you don't want to fry your mouse, and certainly you want the correct pin arrangement to match the 4 different connectors of the PS2 connector. So we have 1 data, 1 ground, 1 clock, and then we have a 5-volt connection or a VCC or voltage connection in there. So this is an example I'm showing you here that is the bracket I have. If you look, obviously you can see 6 different holes plus the middle hole there for the pin that connects in there. But essentially you have 6 of these and only 4 of them are really used. So if we're looking at the bracket, kind of going from where the pin is actually installed in there, that is pin 3. And then if we move it to the top right, that and pin 3 is ground typically, pin 5 is on the top right, pin 6 is the top left, and then kind of across or beneath pin 6 there is pin 4, and that's usually the 5-volt or VCC connection. And then finally on the bottom left is pin 2, and then on the bottom right is usually pin 1, which is data. So the goal here is to test continuity between each hole or socket here in the connector, along with the wires, to see which ones complete the circuit and have continuity. And then once you do that, you can essentially label them, and then you'll know in the new connector which holes to plug these in that correspond to the motherboard header. Since we know kind of Asus basically provides documentation on their headers, you can find that pretty much anywhere, and I think I linked to it on Vogons as well. So that's what I want to show you today. Obviously you're going to need a multimeter. You want to select whatever mode gives you resistance, and then you have your you have your input. You also have your input lead here, which is obviously the red one, and then you have your COM lead, which is the black one. And what I will do is, for example, here I am in pin number 3, which is a ground, and so we'll figure out which pin the ground is by testing continuity. So you hold your red or input lead to the wire, and then see if it beeps, and it does. So that means you have continuity, which means that this red wire corresponds to that hole in the PS2 connector, which would be ground. You'd mark that as appropriate. So next we'll move the pin around. We'll put this in number 5, which is the clock. And we'll test again. Hold your black COM lead to the pin, and you'll test the green wire here. looks like pin number 5 in the top right is the green one. So you'd make a note of that. And then again, you just work your way around the PS2 connector here, placing the pin in all the holes and testing continuity. You'll find that some of them won't beep in this case, or won't have any kind of can't say it, any continuity because there's no circuit there. But once you know which holes are what, or which wires go to the various, or which wires actually function for clock, ground, data, and voltage, then you can basically insert the pins in the motherboard. Or I should say, I'm sorry, not the pins in the motherboard, the pins in the bracket that correspond to the pins on the motherboard, and that should enable your mouse to work. So in order to, first of all, obviously you see this connector is how it is here, and that's because I took it out already. But that really is the biggest pain in the butt, is just getting these pins out of the existing connector to test them. And to do that, I use one of these little magical screwdriver kits. It's a little blurry here, but there's little tabs. I'm not sure if you can see these, but in each of these little chambers, there's a little plastic tab here that you can actually dig in and pry up. And that will allow the pin to slide backwards out of it. It's kind of like a little catch pin in there. But once you do that, you can pull these out on each side. Obviously, I don't remember which configuration this one came in by default. In fact, I think this one actually had a little blocking pin in one of these holes. But very, very simply, once you pry these little plastic tabs up or back to bend them upwards, that will release that little mechanism that's holding the pin in place, and then you can just remove them. And then when you're all done and you know exactly where they need to be in the connector, just push them back in, and then you'll be able to connect that up to your PS2 header on your motherboard and have PS2 mouse functionality without destroying your mouse. So again, in summary, basically it's only 4 wires. You got to test continuity. Each of these wires will tell you exactly what spot in the PS2 connector goes with what. You're only using four wires, so four of these holes in the header that correspond with clock, ground, data, and your plus 5 volt connection or voltage connection there, which is what the voltage that the header uses, or the mouse will use. So again, if you look online, there's plenty of information out on some of the Vogon's web pages in there, as well as the archive, Wayback Machine, or archive.org. So as you can see, I've replaced all the wires back into this 2x5 row connector. And essentially, I pushed the plastic pins back in so they're nice and secure. They're not going to go anywhere. And all we have to do now is just plug it into the motherboard. So if we're looking at the connectors, and after I did a continuity test, I've identified the green pin as pin 5, the green wire as pin 5. Pin 5 is the clock. So the clock goes in the bottom left hand side of the connector, as you can see here. The red wire in this case, the red one is pin 3, which is the ground. Ground goes in the top left, if we're looking at it, I guess, connector there. And then the brown pin or wire is number 1, which is the data connection. That goes in the second from the left there in the top row. And finally, the yellow wire is actually the plus 5 volt DC or VCC, or pin 4, and that goes in the fourth top row, fourth from the left. So you can see there's extra holes here we're not going to use. That doesn't matter anyway. This header will fit just fine over the existing motherboard header, I guess, and we shouldn't have any issues with the PS2 mouse being connected, since we've just again tested the continuity, and should be good to go. So simple as that. It's really not that big of a challenge, as long as you have a multimeter and as long as you can get these little pins out of this bracket, which again is really the most difficult part. And get yourself a needle and go to town. Have fun. If you have any questions, just shoot me a message on Vogon's. I've done a lot of these brackets now, and I'm pretty comfortable with modify them to suit my purpose. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, give me a shout.